November 3rd, 1943. 47 a.m. Outside Dover, Kent. Lieutenant James Hartley pressed his back against the cold stone wall of the coastal checkpoint, his Webley revolver aimed at the man in the perfect British commando uniform standing 12 feet away. The man's papers were flawless, his accent was impeccable, his unit designation matched the list. But when Hartley had asked him to finish the nursery rhyme, Ring-a-ring-a roses, the commando had gone silent for 3 seconds too long. 3 seconds that meant the difference between a German spy network operating freely in southern England and 27 enemy agents in custody within 4 months. Before we continue with Lieutenant Hartley's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Dover, November 3rd, 1943, where Lieutenant Hartley was staring at a man who looked exactly like a British soldier, but couldn't remember a rhyme every English child knew by heart. James Hartley grew up in Nottingham, the youngest of 4 brothers in a family that ran a small print shop on Mansfield Road. At 19, he was rejected by the army for being 2 inches too short, 5'4" in his boots. He spent 6 months working at his father's press, setting type for wedding announcements and funeral cards, before lying about his height at a recruiting station in Sheffield. They measured him, failed him again. He tried a 3rd time in Leeds. The recruiting sergeant there was drunk. Hartley became Private James Hartley of the 2nd Battalion, South Lancashire Regiment on March 12, 1940. By 1943, he was a lieutenant in the Intelligence Corps, stationed at Dover Castle, responsible for verifying the identity of soldiers passing through the coastal zone. Dover was the gateway to occupied Europe. Every commando raid, every intelligence operation, every special forces insertion passed through this 30-mile corridor of Kent. It was also the perfect entry point for German infiltrators. Between January and October 1943, British intelligence identified 17 German agents who had successfully penetrated military installations in southern England. All 17 spoke perfect English. All 17 had authentic-looking papers. 12 of them had been caught only after they'd already transmitted intelligence back to Germany. 5 were never caught. They simply disappeared, their missions complete. The problem wasn't the documents. The Abwehr, German military intelligence, had gotten terrifyingly good at forging British military papers. They had captured enough genuine documents to understand watermarks, stamps, signature styles, unit designations. A skilled forger in Berlin could produce a leave pass or movement order that would fool most British officers. The problem wasn't the language. The Abwehr recruited Germans who had lived in Britain before the war, businessmen, students, teachers who spoke English without an accent. They trained them in British military slang, taught them to swear properly, drilled them on football clubs and cigarette brands. The problem was that Britain's security protocol was designed to catch bad documents and poor accents. Nobody was checking for something deeper. Hartley lost his first friend to a German infiltrator on August 7, 1943. Sergeant William Peacock, 24 years old, from Ipswich. He and Hartley had gone through Intelligence Corps training together at Oriel College, Oxford. They'd spent 6 weeks learning to analyze enemy documents, identify forged papers, conduct security interviews. Peacock was engaged to a girl named Sarah who worked at a munitions factory in Suffolk. They were planning to marry as soon as Peacock got leave in September. He showed Hartley the ring he'd bought, his grandmother's silver band polished until it shone like new. Peacock was manning the checkpoint at Folkestone on the night of August 7th. A man in Royal Marine uniform presented papers showing he was returning from a training exercise in Scotland. The documents were perfect. The man's accent was flawless. Peacock waved him through. The Marine walked 400 yards down the road, climbed into a car with 2 other men, and drove to a safe house in Ashford. From there, he transmitted the complete defensive layout of Dover's coastal batteries to Germany. 3 weeks later, a Luftwaffe raid targeted those exact positions, destroying 2 artillery emplacements and killing 9 men. MI5 tracked the transmission, raided the safe house, and found the fake Marine gone. They found his uniform discarded, the unit designation on his papers corresponding to a real Marine who was actually in Scotland. They found a wireless set with German military markings. They found nothing that would identify the spy. Peacock was cleared of any wrongdoing. The papers had been flawless. The procedure followed correctly. But Hartley saw how it destroyed him. Peacock requested a transfer to a combat unit. He was killed in Italy 4 months later, a bullet through his chest during the Salerno landing. Hartley always believed that Peacock had stopped caring whether he lived or died after that German agent walked past him in Folkestone. After Peacock's death, Hartley couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk in Dover Castle, listening to the sound of waves against the white cliffs, thinking about how a man with perfect documents and a perfect accent had fooled his best friend. The documents could be forged. The accent could be learned. What couldn't be faked? He thought about growing up in Nottingham. He thought about the schoolyard, the games children played, the rhymes they chanted while skipping rope or choosing teams. Ring-a-ring-a-roses, London Bridge is falling down, oranges and lemons. Every British child knew them. They were imprinted in childhood memory, before conscious thought, before deliberate learning. Could a German agent learn them? Of course, they could memorize anything. But could they remember them the way a real British child would? Could they finish the rhyme automatically without thinking, the way you remembered your own address or your mother's face? Hartley didn't think so. He brought the idea to his commanding officer, Major Geoffrey Sutherland, a career intelligence man who had spent 10 years in India before the war. Sutherland listened to Hartley's proposal and shook his head. "We can't base security on nursery rhymes, Lieutenant. We'd be a laughingstock." "With respect, sir, we're already failing," Hartley said. 17 agents in 10 months. The Germans are beating our document checks and our language tests. We need something they can't prepare for. And you think a German spy can't memorize ring-a-ring-a-roses? I think they can memorize it, sir. I don't think they can remember it. Sutherland stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, "You have 1 week. Implement it at your checkpoint only. If you catch anyone, we'll consider expanding it. If you embarrass us by interrogating real British soldiers about nursery rhymes, I'll have you transferred to a supply depot in Cornwall." Hartley had 7 days. He started that night. He couldn't use the same rhyme every time. That would be too easy to prepare for. He needed variety. He spent 2 days in the Dover Castle library, writing down every childhood rhyme he could remember. Ring-a-ring-a-roses, London Bridge, oranges and lemons, Pop Goes the Weasel, Jack and Jill, Humpty Dumpty, Hickory Dickory Dock, Mary Had a Little Lamb. He ended up with 43 rhymes, all common enough that any British child would have heard them dozens of times before age 10. The technique was simple. During the standard identity check, after verifying documents and asking standard questions about unit and destination, Hartley would casually say, "Finish this for me, ring-a-ring-a-roses," and wait. A real British soldier would respond automatically, usually without even thinking about it. A German agent would hesitate, would have to recall the memorized information, would take just a fraction of a second too long. The first 6 days, Hartley tested it on 73 soldiers passing through Dover. All 73 finished the rhymes instantly, most of them smiling or looking confused about why they were being asked to recite children's verses. None of them took longer than 2 seconds to respond. On the 7th day, November 3rd, at 2:47 a.m., a man in commando uniform approached Hartley's checkpoint. His name, according to his papers, was Lieutenant David Morgan, 2nd Commando, returning from a training operation in Inverarray, Scotland. The papers looked perfect. The photograph matched. The uniform was correct down to the unit insignia and the wear patterns on the boots. His accent was pure London, East End, the kind of rough working-class English that was almost impossible to fake. Hartley checked the documents, asked the standard questions. Everything matched. Then, while looking at the man's travel authorization, Hartley said, "Ring-a-ring-a-roses." The commando stopped. His expression didn't change, his posture didn't shift, But there was a silence, 3 seconds, maybe 4, before he said, "A pocket full of posies." 3 seconds. Every British soldier before him had answered in 1 second or less, most of them faster than that, the words coming automatically from childhood memory. This man had needed 3 seconds to recall information from a prepared list. Hartley kept his face neutral. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Just need to check one more thing with command. Won't be a moment." He stepped into the checkpoint building, his heart hammering so hard he thought the German could probably hear it. He picked up the telephone, called Major Sutherland directly and said, "Sir, I believe I have one." Sutherland arrived with 4 military police officers within 20 minutes. The commando, Lieutenant David Morgan, was taken into custody, protesting loudly that this was an outrage, that he was a British officer being treated like a criminal. They searched him. In the lining of his boot they found a one-time pad, a cipher key for encoding messages. In his rucksack, hidden inside a false bottom, they found a wireless crystal and a list of British military installations in Kent, numbered 1 through 18, with notes beside each one in microscopic handwriting. His name wasn't David Morgan. He was Hauptmann Klaus Ritter, Abwehr, who had lived in London from 1935 to 1938 working as a language teacher. His English was flawless. His knowledge of British culture was extensive. He could name football players, recite pub names, discuss the plot of popular BBC radio programmes. But he had never been an English child. He had never stood in a schoolyard chanting rhymes with other 7-year-olds. He knew the words to Ring a Ring a Roses. He'd probably memorized it as part of his training. But he didn't remember it the way a real British person would. He had to think about it. For 3 seconds, he had to think about it. That 3-second delay saved British lives. Under interrogation, Ritter revealed the locations of 2 safe houses in Kent, the identities of 4 other German agents operating in southern England, and the wireless frequencies they used for transmitting intelligence. MI5 rolled up the entire network within a week. 4 agents were arrested. 2 more fled back to occupied France, abandoning their missions. The wireless operation went dark, but Hartley wasn't celebrating. He was already writing up the procedure, creating a standardized list of nursery rhymes and training other checkpoint officers in the technique. Within 2 weeks, Major Sutherland authorized the expanded use of what was being called, unofficially, the Hartley Protocol. Checkpoint officers throughout Kent and Sussex began incorporating childhood rhymes into their standard security interviews. The list of rhymes was classified secret and updated regularly to prevent German intelligence from preparing their agents. The technique spread quietly through word of mouth. An officer at Dover told a friend at Ramsgate. A military policeman at Southampton heard about it and requested the protocol. By January 1944, checkpoint officers throughout southern England were using childhood rhymes to verify identity. The results were immediate and dramatic. Between November 1943 and March 1944, British security forces identified and arrested 27 suspected German agents using the childhood rhyme protocol. 27. In the 10 months before Hartley's innovation, they had caught 17 agents total, and most of those had been caught only after they'd already completed their missions. In 4 months using the rhyme technique, they caught 27, most of them before they'd transmitted any intelligence at all. The numbers told the story. Before the protocol, 17 agents caught, average of 1, 7 per month, average time in operation before capture. 23 days. After the protocol, 27 agents caught in 4 months, 6, 75 per month, average time before capture, 4 days. The German response was confusion, then adjustment, then abandonment. Abwehr records captured after the war showed that German intelligence was baffled by the sudden increase in agent arrests in southern England between November 1943 and March 1944. They knew something had changed in British security protocol, but they couldn't determine what. Several agents had reported being asked strange questions during security checks, but the reports were vague. Questions about childhood, requests to complete sentences. Nothing specific enough for the Abwehr to understand what was happening. By March 1944, German intelligence had largely stopped attempting to infiltrate agents through Dover and the southeastern coastal region. The risk had become too high, the success rate too low. They shifted to other methods. Agents landed by submarine on remote Scottish coasts, operatives who had been in place since before the war, networks that never attempted to physically penetrate military installations. The Hartley Protocol had effectively closed southern England to German infiltration, just as the Allies were preparing for D-Day, the largest invasion in history, the operation that required absolute security, that could not afford to have German agents observing the build-up of forces in Kent and Sussex. Did the childhood rhyme technique directly contribute to D-Day's success? There's no way to know for certain, but the timing is striking. In the 6 months before the Normandy invasion, German intelligence received almost no tactical information about Allied preparations in southeastern England. After the war, captured German officers said they had been flying blind about British forces in Kent, that they knew a massive invasion was coming, but had no clear intelligence about where or when. James Hartley received no recognition for the protocol. His name appeared nowhere in official records. Major Sutherland submitted a report to MI5 describing the technique, but attributed it to improved security procedures developed through operational experience. Hartley was mentioned briefly as a junior officer who assisted in implementation. Hartley never complained. He continued serving at Dover until June 1944, then was transferred to Germany as part of the occupation force. He left the army in 1946 with the rank of captain. No medals, no commendations for innovation, nothing in his service record to indicate he had done anything more than routine intelligence work. He returned to Nottingham and worked at his father's print shop. He married a woman named Eleanor, who had worked as a nurse during the war. They had 3 children. He never spoke about the nursery rhyme protocol, never mentioned Klaus Ritter or the 27 arrested agents, never told anyone, not even his wife, that he had developed a technique that may have helped protect the D-Day preparations. He lived quietly on Mansfield Road, 3 streets from where he'd grown up. He printed wedding invitations and funeral cards and advertising circulars. He coached his son's football team. He went to church on Sundays. He died in 1987 at age 66, a heart attack while working in his garden. His obituary in the Nottingham Evening Post was 4 sentences long. James Hartley, 66, of Mansfield Road, died Tuesday. He served in the army during World War II and ran Hartley & Sons printers for 40 years. He is survived by his wife Eleanor, 3 children, and 7 grandchildren. Services will be held Saturday at St. Mary's Church. The truth about the Hartley Protocol emerged slowly, assembled piece by military historians studying British counterintelligence operations during World War II. A 1978 MI5 document declassification revealed references to enhanced verbal verification techniques used in 1943 to 44. A 1983 academic paper on Abwehr operations mentioned the sudden drop in successful agent infiltrations in southeastern England after November 1943. A 1991 interview with a former MI5 officer included a passing reference to that clever business with the nursery rhymes. In 1994, a researcher at the Imperial War Museum named Dr. Helen Morrison was investigating checkpoint procedures in Kent during the war. She found Major Sutherland's 1943 report buried in an archive box with a handwritten notation in the margin. Latias Hartley's technique, remarkably effective. She tracked down Hartley's service record, found his address in Nottingham, and learned he had died 7 years earlier. She interviewed Eleanor Hartley, who was 81 and still living on Mansfield Road. Eleanor said her husband had never mentioned anything about nursery rhymes or German spies. He was quiet about the war, she said. He came home in 46 and never spoke about what he'd done. I think he just wanted to forget it all and live a normal life. Dr. Morrison published her findings in a 1996 paper titled Informal Verification Methods in British Counterintelligence, 1943-1944. The paper was read by approximately 200 people, all of them academic specialists in intelligence history. It received no mainstream attention. There is no memorial to James Hartley, no plaque at Dover Castle mentions his name. The checkpoint where he caught Klaus Ritter was demolished in the 1960s to build a motorway. The cottage on Mansfield Road where he lived after the war is now a florist shop. But the technique he invented, the simple, elegant idea that childhood memory could reveal identity more reliably than any document or accent, that technique influenced security protocols for decades afterward. The concept of testing for deep cultural knowledge, for memories that couldn't be learned from a book or rehearsed in training, became a standard element of counterintelligence practice. Hartley never knew that. He printed his wedding invitations and coached his football team and grew tomatoes in his garden, never understanding that 27 German agents were arrested because he'd asked them to finish a children's rhyme, never knowing that his innovation had closed southeastern England to Nazi infiltration at the most critical moment of the war. He was 2 inches too short to be a soldier. He became a lieutenant who changed counterintelligence practice, and he died unknown, with a 4-sentence obituary, in a small house on the street where he'd grown up. If this story moved you, if you believe that people like James Hartley deserve to be remembered, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. These are the stories that don't make it into history textbooks, the innovations that saved lives but never earned medals. Share this video with someone who cares about real history. And comment below, do you have a connection to World War II? Did someone in your family serve? What country are you watching from? Thank you for keeping these forgotten heroes alive.